Hello and welcome to Give and Toke, the show that elevates the conversation about cannabis to a higher level. I'm your host Paul, and today we welcome Tom Forrest, a certified horticulturist, agronomist, and expert in soil and crop production. In 2019, Tom travelled the world as a recipient of the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust Fellowship. Visiting 10 different countries and spending time at more than 50 cannabis cultivation facilities allowed him to publish a white paper and release a short documentary sharing his findings from his worldwide exploration of cannabis. Today he splits his time between Puro, which is one of New Zealand's leading cultivators of cannabis, indicated technology, and Stealth Garden. He has helped countless groups and organisations to design and supply cannabis cultivation facilities since the start of medicinal legalisation. If you like what you hear on today's show, be sure to follow and subscribe. Get in touch with us at Give and Toke or giveandtoke.com.au, where you can also check out our range of merchandise. But for now, please enjoy my conversation with Tom Forrest. Tom Forrest, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to chat.
Little shout out to our friends at Habitat One co-working space out here in lovely Healesville. It was beautiful to drive out here today. Such a lovely part of the world, hey?
Oh, mate, the Yarra Valley is one of the most beautiful places to come and visit. It's a really thriving community out here. It's phenomenal agriculture, and I'm very, very privileged. I think there's a good ratio of trees to people, so I'm happy to bring you out here and show you this part of the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, to me, you're the international man of mystery when it comes to cannabis, always flying around the place. You know, you're in different parts of Australia, but you also spend your time between New Zealand, Thailand, and Australia. Where is it that you feel most at home?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I guess sometimes I think of myself as a bit of a West New Zealander. I'm not from New Zealand, but I love rugby. I love the great outdoors. I love pristine nature, and I'm really fortunate to be able to spend a lot of my time over there. I bounce between Thailand, Adelaide, Melbourne, and New Zealand primarily, and I'm really fortunate to sort of see the best and different aspects of all of those locations. But I think for me, probably Melbourne is where I feel most at home. It's where my family's from, and so it's a nice base to have. But I'm very lucky to be able to travel a lot for my work and work with great people in different parts of the world.
When most people Google search you, they'll see a photo of long flowing dreadlocks. I'm sure a lot went into the decision to grow your dreadlocks and a lot of time and energy. Why the decision to make the chop, and when did that happen?
Yeah, I guess getting dreadlocks was always something that I wanted to do as a junior. I used to go to a lot of outdoor music festivals and bush doof kind of parties, and I'd look up to these incredible men and women with long flowing dreadlocks and amazing wisdoms that were mentors at the parties and really looked after the younger generation. So I didn't get a haircut for around 10 years, and I grew my dreads to the point where they were probably down to around my bum. And it was a big part of my personality. I think being an academic with dreadlocks and going to pharmaceutical conferences and wearing a suit and having long hair, it kept people on their toes. And I like people not being able to think that they can read a book by its cover. So it was a big part of me, and this is not a story I tell often or ever, and I've never made it public before, but we're friends here, and so I guess the beginning of the end for the dreadlocks was when I was working at a Perth garden show. I was there. It was a 5-day outdoor event. We were promoting fertilisers and gardening products and new horticultural technologies with the team from Stealth Garden. And on the 5th day, a particularly hot and sunny Perth day, I had a few coffees and made my way over to the Portaloos. Sorry, we're taking this to a strange place already. I sat down in the Portaloo, I did my number 2, I did my business, and I stood up and felt the bottom of my dreads were dripping wet. It was an uncomfortable moment of realisation. Outside of that, I'd also been working a lot in agriculture, and having long hair was quite difficult. But I think that was the moment where I went, all right, it's time for these dreads to go. So I was really wanting to do something a bit different. I did a fundraiser, and I looked at a charity called Are You Bogged, Mate? They look after, really focused on men's mental health in rural blokes. So they go out to rural areas, they make an effort to connect with farmers who are often very remote and isolated, and the typical stoic Australian male of bottle up your feelings and don't talk about it. And they want to break that down in a way that's approachable for these farmers. So they put on barbecues, they talk to them in their language, and they really focus on making sure our farmers have got someone to talk to about anything in their life. So I started raising funds. I had donations from publicly listed cannabis company CEOs, from black market croppers, from everyone in between. It was really, really powerful to see who came out of the woodwork to support this charity. I raised a little over $5,000 and then went and got the chop and, lost a little bit of my identity, looked a little bit more normal, but I was really proud of doing something that I think has a profound impact and helps continue the conversation about talking about mental health in rural farmers. So it was a big turning point in my life, and now, blend in a little bit more.
Well, thank you for sharing, your vulnerability, as is kind of the cause of the charity itself. To go from, doing number twos and dipping your hair into that to getting a number two at the barber is very impressive. So thanks for getting that one out early. I do appreciate that. Now, in the circles I run in, when your name comes up, it's met with excitement, enthusiasm, and a deep respect. You clearly have made an impact. You clearly have a passion for the plant. When did you know cannabis was for you as a pursuit for a career?
Yeah, it goes back a long way. Like, I think in my senior teenage years, I think I started experimenting with cannabis. When I went to university, I studied in Canberra. Canberra universities have a very strong cannabis culture that exists, and that was where I was really introduced to cannabis in a community sense, in a social sense, and how important it was to my university group. And that was, I think, where I first appreciated cannabis. Like, it gave me a level of emotional stability, like dealing with teenage angst through to finding myself in my 20s. Cannabis was always the comfort blanket that wrapped itself around me and kind of, for better or worse, got me through some really challenging years as we all have growing up. But I think the real changing point for me was two things happened. So my mum got a bit crook, and she was on medication that the side effects were horrible. Nausea, lack of appetite, sleep disorders, like really, really challenging side effects. And the only thing that would help her was medicinal cannabis. At that time, it was probably not prescribed, but it was used medicinally. And seeing her consume from a vaporizer, because she's a smart consumer, and then get up and go for a walk with the dog or clean the house a little bit and become active, that was really profound for me. That was the first time I'd seen cannabis not in a social circle, but in a truly instantaneous medicinal benefit. Maybe a year or two later, I moved in with my mum in Mornington, and I was getting really into aquaponics. I loved aquaponics. I was growing rainbow trout and all these foods, and we were setting up aquaponics systems in primary schools and community gardens with a few friends. And my mum started introducing me to just general gardening and gardening with my mum and aquaponics. And suddenly I had this penny drop moment where I was like, this is really what I want to do. I want to be in horticulture. I've seen what cannabis can do. I've seen how incredible gardening and aquaponics and hydroponics is. I want to make a career of that. So I think I was working as a body piercer at the time. I found myself in that strange world, and I dropped it all and went back and studied production horticulture. I got a scholarship to Chisholm to work in the glasshouse there, which is a production horticulture tomato glasshouse. And that was the start of it all. And I went to work in a hydroponics shop and never looked back. It became the bread and butter for me, the thing that really resonated with me at my core. And yeah, so I think probably I can thank my mum for moving into the cannabis world and making that the lifetime direction.
I'm curious because I think a lot of people think about the importance of the connection with the plant. You also clearly have a connection with the people that you're involved with and engaged with. You're also working with your partner, Tilly, in her vineyard. And I think above us is a generation of men who don't necessarily love their partners, the way that we do. What's it like kind of working with your family and having that level of engagement with the work and the passions you have?
Yeah, so it's incredible. My family background is in agriculture. So my dad was in the cotton industry, and we were raised around sort of chemical agriculture and the cotton industry in Moree in New South Wales. So I've always wanted to be around farming. And then meeting my partner, and we were set up by a few of my housemates. They went, look, there's this lady, she's got dreadlocks too, shorter than mine. And so Tilly and I were introduced over a common love of hairstyles, and also, she was kind of doing what I was doing in the cannabis industry, but in viticulture and wine. So she was looking after a vineyard, growing her own grapes. She had her own brand and was producing wine that was being sold through bottle stores and fine dining establishments, but small artisanal craft production. So we built a foundation on talking about secondary metabolites and everything from the start of season, what happens in spring to harvest, and all the different things from agricultural field management to people management. It's a really common thread for our relationship, and our relationship's happy, healthy, and thriving at the moment. The Tilly J Wines brand is growing, and she's a superstar in her industry, winning People's Choice Awards and selling to places all around the world. And for me, I think cannabis has an incredible amount we can learn from viticulture. So the way I often describe it to people is viticulture and winemaking has an intergenerational knowledge and understanding of terroir that's been passed down from generations to generations. They know if they grow, say, the MV6 clone on an east-facing volcanic soil at a certain latitude, what flavour profile that's going to express. And they have handbooks and videos and really detailed stages of growth from everything from cloning right through to processing and production. So it's this grandparent-esque character in the world that has so much knowledge to share and give and so much understanding. Cannabis is the unruly cousin.
The black sheep.
Yeah, it's been out there a while. It's like, look, I can grow under some HPS street lights, bust me out in a garage. I'm going to give you some flavour. I don't know what you call me. I could be this, I could be that, but you'll have a good time. And we're still learning. Like it's an infant industry. Like, yeah, we're standing on the shoulders of giants because through Prohibition, people have done some incredible work. But in terms of that established knowledge and that really scientific understanding, we're only just scratching the surface. So I look to viticulture as an industry where we can learn how they educate their farmers, how they educate their consumers, even how they have competitions and judging. And look at Wine Yarra Valley, they put on farmers market events. I was at the Thornbury food truck thing the other night, pouring wines, talking about how we grow the grapes. And it was a whole bunch of young up-and-coming brands supporting the grassroots industry. And while cannabis is still strictly a medicinal commodity, and we can't obviously do that, it does show where we can get to with craft production, farm gate sales, and educating the consumer to appreciate where their food, wine, or medicine comes from.
You see those kind of events and it's not hard to envision, a weed night at Welcome to Thornbury. Like, those are the things we're aspiring to, not because we want to glamorize it, but because we want to normalize it. So that's really cool. I mean, you mentioned scratching the surface of where we're at in terms of cannabis knowledge. What's really exciting you at the moment? Like, is there something that you've learned recently, something you've discovered, something you're on the cusp of discovering that's really kind of getting you out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, there's a few things that are tickling me at the moment. So firstly, I think the work we're doing at Puro is something I'm profoundly proud of because it's showing that agriculture can be done differently. So cannabis in general is paving the way. I don't love the term, but the Living Soil Organic Movement, LSO, the people that are growing in protected cropping without the use of any chemicals, and they're doing it in a way that's more or less sustainable. That's a really interesting segue because it's taking agriculture away from chemical agriculture, and growing with fertilizer is a way of producing beautiful plants consistently. That's amazing. But understanding what happens in the soil, working with microbes, working with fungi, working with inoculants, from leaf inoculants to root inoculants, and how cannabis is paving the way for that. Like guys like Steve Cantwell at Green Life Productions, they're producing some of the best cannabis in the world without any chemicals, without any artificial fertilizer. And that's incredible. It's not easy. It's a steep learning curve, but that's exciting. And Puro is showing we can do that at scale. So we're growing tens of thousands of plants, and we're doing it certified organic. So we're growing an agricultural, pharmaceutical, compliant commodity sustainably, using lessons from permaculture and natural farming and biodynamics and bringing that all together. So we're now writing a handbook on that. We're publishing information as part of a government grant program, and we're going to publish information on how to grow cannabis sustainably, which is in the works. We've done, I think, around 7 chapters, and it'll be a written book. It'll be an online platform. There's a whole bunch of ways we're going to deliver it, but that's exciting. So from the agricultural side, that kind of approach tickles me, learning how we can grow more efficiently, even getting the best out of our fertilizers, using the best inputs to produce a high quality product. That makes me excited. The other side to it, and anyone that's in the cannabis sector will understand, growing it is only half the battle. 50% of the challenge, if you're getting into cannabis as a primary production commodity, is drying, processing, and packaging. That's an art and a science in itself. And there's lots of different ways you can skin that cat. I've just written an article about post-harvest processes and how you can really get the best out of flower or completely ruin a cannabis commodity. Yeah. And it's everything. You can vacuum microwave dry it, you can artisanally slow dry it, you can fast dry it. All these different ways of drying have their pros and their cons. What we've started trialing at Puro is a live dried process. So taking plant material from the field, and within a matter of seconds, we have that at -40. We then take it through a series of, it's a 7-stage lyophilization process. So think about freeze-dried food, but with precise control over the vacuum pressure, the Millitor pressure, the temperature, and the duration. So we're retaining the best profile. We're getting higher cannabinoids, unique terpene retention and higher terpene retention, and even the visual look of the buds is coming out differently. And that's, for me, a bit of a game changer. Like, we can process material as per customer demand. We can store it as we need to. So these sorts of technologies, I think, bring a new approach to cannabis production. And that's what excites me, figuring out some technologies don't work, and I won't name and shame the ones that don't, but finding when a technology delivers on something as it's supposed to and how that affects the whole process flow from getting that product into bulk packaging, get it into final product packaging, putting it in a can with liquid nitrogen so the aromas are wild. These kinds of things are really exciting, and yeah, we're just getting into the unique production of new and exciting ways of bringing cannabis to market. So from start to finish, I think there's some new things to keep an eye on.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. I wish this was a video podcast just so people could see the way your face lit up as you were talking about cannabis agricultural technology there. Those are really exciting developments. And I think that's what a lot of particularly consumers need to realize is going on behind the scenes. I think a lot of people want the industry to move fast. They want to change in regulations. But when you kind of get away from the pessimism and you step back and look at what's going on, these are the kind of conversations and decisions being made about this plant we like to consume. There are people behind the scenes really excited about getting the best out of this plant.
Oh, obviously won't go too hard into the challenges that we're all facing at the moment. The regulations right now is a bit of a flawed system. There's problems with the driving laws. There's headaches and hurdles and paper hoops that people are jumping through that is a deep rabbit hole of frustration for a lot of people. And the sad part of that is I've seen great cannabis workers, passionate enthusiasts and agronomists, scientists, researchers and extraction artists tap out of the cannabis world because of the regulatory quagmire that they have to wade through. And I know there's awesome work being done by the Legalised Cannabis Party. We are seeing regulatory evolution around the world, but it is still frustrating to see exactly where we're at right now and how close we are to really, I think the wave is only just broken, and we're on the cusp of seeing it open up and really develop. And I think Thailand is a really interesting case study for what happens there. You take your hands off the steering wheel of regulation, and for those that haven't been, Thailand is pretty crazy right now. There's been talk of them trying to control it a little bit more, and there will be a licensing structure that exists. But for the most part, it's been a free-for-all. People can grow, produce, sell, set up a dispensary, consume, and as a result, genetics, growers, knowledge have all converged on Thailand. And from an indoor cultivation perspective, outdoors there is a little bit more tricky, but from an indoor perspective, it's really interesting how the growing methodology evolves, how the cultivars and the genetics are evolving rapidly. Some really good friends of mine are doing incredible work there, taking cannabis genetics to the next level because there's no real regulatory barriers. We're working over there. We're promoting and selling house and garden nutrients there. It's exciting to be on the coalface. And then at the other end of that, you've got this crazy cannabis culture that's emerged with influencers and media and community that exists in the full spectrum of cannabis. So one example, I think on my most recent trip, I was invited out to a dispensary tour, which was lovely. Then we went to a fine dining cannabis event where they were pairing different sushi with different cultivars, and it was so yummy. And then we went from that fine dining and cannabis rooftop event to a cannabis consumption competition where they had how quickly can someone smoke 3 grams in a bong? And that was
and you
horrible.
won with flying colours, I assume.
Junior Tom would have given it a red hot nudge, but no. I watched it with slightly appalled eyes and thought, yeah, it's kind of like drinking competitions, I guess. So you can have a nice fine dining night with wine pairing, and you can have someone trying to scull
Like a chugging
10 beers.
competition. Yeah. It's quite a different level of decorum there, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's interesting to see. And at the end of the day, no one died.
Yeah, exactly.
The kids looked a bit
Burger
worse
King
for
got
wear.
absolutely raided, but that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. A few people were a little bit non-communicative after they tried to have a crack, but yeah, it's a fascinating case study for what happens in the cannabis community, and I think it's only just on the cusp. So we'll be back over there in November. There's a conference, the Asia Hemp Expo, which is kind of shaping to be the next, I guess, MJ Biz, like a big worldwide conference of growers, suppliers, brands, from seeds to clones to consumables to hardware to finished product, all under one roof. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to get back to Bangkok and see the growing Asia industry and how that's going to find its place in the cannabis world.
It's very cool. It's great to see you when you're over there and see your Instagram stories. I did see you wearing a suit jacket one time while you were there. I don't understand how that's even possible in that climate, but you're over there doing business, obviously. Like, what can we learn from Thailand? You know, we're going to kind of cross this path a bit later on in the show, but I think while we're here, what can we learn from them? Because I think you alluded to it in a way, like you can just kind of take your hands off the wheel and see what happens.
Yeah, I think the people that are succeeding over there are, firstly, from a consumption point of view, the dispensaries that are comfortable, are welcoming, are clean. Like there's the street carts on the side of the road with a jar of nondescript cannabis that we don't even know what it is, what's in it. It doesn't have a C of A, and you don't feel safe consuming that because being a grower, you know what kind of chemicals can go into cannabis and what potential harms exist by using the wrong chemicals. And so I found some of the dispensaries were beautiful. They were well lit. They had nice, clean environments. They had a full range from flower to topicals to different delivery methods. Everything from suppositories to pessaries to edibles to capsules. Like having that range really allows consumers and knowledge of what they're trying to consume. An edible doesn't need to be 25 milligrams or higher. Yeah. Your gummy mummies might actually want a 1 or a 3 and be able to dose themselves accordingly. And it's not a nightclub serving cocktails. It's a lounge that's comfortable for people on cannabis. So those dispensaries that built that model, I think they've got some really, really good work in showing how that can be done in a way where it's not quite like a bottle shop and it's not quite like a seedy cannabis lounge. Yeah. It's something a little bit different. From a cultivation perspective, I think in Thailand and the rest of the world is showing that people want quality and a level of transparency. They want to know who grew it and how. They want to know exactly, sort of give them the basic numbers like dominant cannabinoids, dominant terpenes, an approximate flavor profile, like put it in some categories. Like we don't exactly know how to classify cannabis yet. That's a moving target. Indica sativa fallacy is just that whole thing is a furphy. But yeah, giving people a bit of an understanding of what they're consuming, and that comes right back to the grower. Growing at the right scale is everything. I think when you see lessons from Canada and have been repeated in Thailand, like there's people in Thailand that, I'm not going to name and shame, but they spend a lot of money on fantastic boardrooms and beautiful buildings and incredible desks and crazy TVs and stuff. And then you go into their cultivation facility and they're hand watering plants. And you're like, this is an agricultural commodity. Grow at a scale that you can manage and sell effectively, and spend your money on growing, producing and packaging a high quality commodity. And so, yeah, there's some lessons where we've seen facilities that have already come and gone because they spent their money the wrong way at the wrong scale. And a lot of it was just they saw the green...
The green rush.
Yeah. Their eyeballs lit up and went, every square metre is 2.5 kilos and every kilo is $3,000, or some of the pricing that was going into Thailand initially was crazy. So, yeah, I think quality, transparency at the right scale, allocating your money in the right places, treating it like a primary produce, it's an agricultural produce, and then selling it in a way that's sophisticated and really appeals to cannabis consumers in the right location, I think were probably some of the takeaways. But there's still lessons coming out, and I'm sure I'll learn more on this coming trip.
The thing that I loved about Thailand when I went last year for my honeymoon was that I was allowed to have fun with cannabis. You know, I cut my teeth as a bud tender in Vancouver. You know, it was a very different world to then come back to Australia. And while I do use it therapeutically and medically specifically, and it has a really great role in my life for that reason, it is so awesome to go to a dispensary, sniff some jars, go, that smells amazing. I've never heard of that before. Go back to a pool and smoke it just for some fun. You know, it's still relaxing me. It's still calming me down. It's still doing what my meds would do here. But it's a little bit more of a fun and, I guess, enriching experience.
Oh, exactly. Like, realistically, your nose knows.
Yeah.
You could have all these terpenes listed and cannabinoids. We're not even telling people what the other VOCs, those volatile organic compounds, are. Yeah. And they're all having an effect. But if you smell something and your body goes, chances are it's probably going to give you a pretty good experience at the right dose. So we don't have that opportunity in most medicinal cannabis frameworks. But it's definitely... Yeah, that's part of that education, is being able to smell a product or sample a product before you're committing to buying a large and often expensive volume of that product. So, yeah, I think it also comes back to the naming of cannabis, which I don't have a solution for. I ask everyone in my entire network, put your heads together and think about how we can do this better, because it's cannabis nomenclature at the moment is a murky space. Viticulture, I guess we have classifications, right? Like we know there's Chardonnay, or there's reds and whites to start. We colour, like I often sort of joke that we could have green and purple cannabis, just break it down really simple. Yeah. And then you have the main parent varieties, Chardonnay, Pinot, Shiraz, blah, blah, blah. And then within that, we have cuttings, like in cannabis, we have clones, like we're growing a Pinot Noir clone MV6, grafted onto a specific type of rootstock, and we know the name of that. And that's pretty widely understood and accepted. And there's accountability. Like you look at the leaf structure, we know we can sequence these varieties and know what they are and where they're from. Cannabis, anyone can call anyone anything, and they could change the name because, I don't know, their guy selling the packs said, hey, I need you to get me Skittles, blah, blah, blah. Like, sure, bro, this is now called Skittles.
Exactly.
And so then the consumer buys it, they think they're getting Skittles, blah, 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 and that's a problem. And so I think once we start to standardize that a little bit more, pay homage to we know there's Landrace cultivars, we know there's, I guess, pioneering cultivars that are well established and well understood and spread through the industry. But then figuring out how a variety becomes a cultivar and where we draw the line as to what that name would be and how stabilized or consistent, what are the agronomic or chemotypic traits that allow us to call a thing a thing. I haven't quite figured it out yet, but these are the things that keep me up at night.
Yeah. You mentioned land races there, and I think that's a term and expression that most cannabis users would be familiar with to some extent. I did hear you refer recently, because I've long thought about them as a place. You're talking about them being a place and time. So talk to us more a little bit about land races, and also, I guess why they're important and why they're worth preserving.
Yeah, it's a really important topic, right? Because cannabis has a phenomenal genetic plasticity. It's more, to my knowledge, one of the most genetically plastic plants in that it can adapt and evolve to a location, to abiotic stress factors, temperature, humidity, soil type, environment, more than almost any other plant on the planet, which is why it's spread so successfully across almost every continent. Yeah, you find it on a mountain, you find it in a desert, you find it in an island, you find it at a low latitude or an extremely high latitude, with 60 degrees north or whatever, where it's only getting a limited amount of daylight, or on the equator where it's getting blasted 12-12 the whole time. So that genetic plasticity means that we have all of these unique landrace varieties. So as cannabis has spread throughout history, generally through humankind and our relationship with the cannabis plant over thousands of years, what we've discovered is that genetic plasticity allows cannabis to evolve agronomic and chemotypic traits. So some of the best hypotheses that I've heard is that a variety will evolve based on the other plants around it as well. So we may find the tropical aromatic profiles are trying to attract tropical pollinators. So say a mango profile may grow in a tropical region because it's trying to attract similar pollinators.
Right.
Yeah, it's still an extensive amount of research is needed to prove this, but it makes sense to me. So what we've found is we have these landrace genetics, which is something where it's evolved in a place over time enough to be stable and unique and acclimatized to that particular location. And it may be a tropical variety, it may be a temperate variety, whatever. And that is something that occurs in that place and time. So if we say go to Thailand and we get there's a landrace there called squirrel tail. It's a super foxtaily thing. So the bud structure is really sparse. It allows airflow through it. It's quite an energizing and at the same time comfortable, relaxing cultivar. You consume it and you're really able to focus. It's not like a wipeout variety. So squirrel tail has evolved to be a Thai landrace genetic that's acclimatized to that location in that point in time. But if we get, say, a Thai landrace from the, say, 40s or 50s to a Thai landrace going over there now, it's, I guess it's adjusted to different sets of environmental abiotic factors and stresses, and has been hundreds of generations of evolution and inbreeding and outcrossing since we collected those original genetics. So what people have in their 70s Afghani or Pakistani seeds compared to their Malawi seeds, compared to their Thai seeds, is never really able to be replicated. We can't go back in time and get that exact generation of genetics. So I think the more people treasure their old seed cultivation or their old seed collections and cultivate them as its own entity rather than extreme outcrossing and hybridization, means that we're not necessarily going to lose anything, because we still don't know what is exactly special about an old landrace genetic, but we know that once it's gone, we can't get it back. Right. And that's the exciting thing, is keep hold of those treasures and treasure them, because that's the gold in the cannabis vault, something that we collect over time, and then we'll always have progression in varieties, but maybe it's time to look back and see what was different, what was special about the old land races and like the heirloom varieties.
I mean, it circles back to the point you made about the irrelevance of the terms indica and sativa, because, they're already redundant anyway. But if you were to say, well, a land race is in an indica or a sativa, which we know it's not anyway. But today, basically everything we've got is a hybrid. So when people are like, oh yeah, I'm looking for a hybrid, almost everything that someone has smoked or consumed rather would be a hybrid, right?
Exactly. From an agriculturalist perspective, when people say the indicas are all short, squatty, and like
broadleaf, sativas are narrow, sparse.
Doesn't always happen that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we look at it like Robert Connell Clark's work, University of Hawaii, he says we realistically, what we're calling indica is more of a subspecies afghanica, and what we call sativa is from the Indian subcontinent, is a more likely indica. So those names don't quite line up. Agriculturally, it doesn't often or ever make sense because they're all hybrids. And then for the consumer, indica, the indicouch fallacy, is not always accurate. It might have a couple of terpenes that are sedative, but the whole entourage effect means that, and people's individual endocannabinoid systems mean that it's not always going to be indica, indicouch, sativa, cerebral. Those terms are kind of misleading. So it's a hard one because I know doctors and patients need some steer on this, and we don't have a better classification system. So I think it's the best to date is kind of ignoring indica sativa, calling everything it is what it is. It's a hybrid unless it's a true landrace, which is extremely rare in the commercial market, and then trying to identify more and more how much the terpenes and the other VOCs and the cannabinoids are going to act synergistically on the majority of the population. It's always going to be different for different people, but giving a broad brush, like this is primarily good for a nighttime consumption. Yeah. We would suggest try this for a daytime and then see how you respond.
And that's interesting because even those descriptors wouldn't work for me personally. Like if we were to talk about stimulating types that are usually attributed to sativa, they make me anxious. So I actually really benefit from a quote unquote indica during the day because it's calming. So that calm and sedation is actually what I need to wind down, and I can be actively minded whilst calm in my body. So yeah, they're really, these descriptors aren't doing anyone any favors.
Exactly. And I'm not a doctor.
No? I'm going to take Dr. Tom Forrest off this episode.
But I would just say try as many different profiles as you can at different dosages and delivery methods until you find what works. So I've got good friends who are lawyers, high-functioning, very, very high-up lawyers. They have the tiniest bit of THC and they go crazy energetic, but I give them a little bit of like other cannabinoids and they get really calm and sedated. Give that same product to another friend and they'll be mellow. So it's a trial and error thing.
One of the big confusions for patients and consumers is that, technically speaking, the name of the cannabis plant is cannabis sativa al. So they might get a product that says cannabis sativa al, indica underneath, and they're on Reddit, the holy grail Reddit, kind of going, hang on, I got told this was an indica. Which one is it? And I mean, first of all, they don't really matter anyway, but that's kind of confusing, right?
Oh, exactly. From the outset, we haven't figured it out at all. You've got someone putting cannabis sativa L, cookies, pebbles, kush, blah, 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 and then this is a gassy. What the fuck?
Yeah. Is this medicine?
How is this supposed to make me feel? And how is a doctor, a patient, and a pharmacy supposed to stand there with conviction and go, of course, this is gassy. Like, one of the funniest things that I've had over the last few years is our medical cannabis license, originally New Zealand licenses had to list every cultivar they were growing. We had a variety that we brought over from Europe called the Matanuska Thunderfuck.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I loved having Thunderfuck written on a government document, and some, bless his cotton socks, Ministry for Primary Industries gentleman or lady was going through and went, yep, Kush, Skittles, Watermelon OG, Thunderfuck. All right, Puro, you're approved. Yeah.
That keeps their job interesting, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, until they realised that our licence was like 9 pages long because we'd brought over genetic libraries from around the world, and they're just writing nonsense words on a page at that stage.
I think that's actually a good segue to talk about Puro. Like, obviously, you've got your work in indicated technology, Stealth Garden, Puro. You've got various roles there. I imagine there's symbiosis between the three. So let's kick it off with Puro. And, you're Aotearoa's leading cultivator, I believe, or one of the top. What's the work that you're doing over in New Zealand with Puro?
Yeah, I guess, a couple of little topics I'll jump through there. My whole business ethos has always tried to build little bridges between companies. So there's that whole thing when you leave an office, you should never try to burn your bridges. Mm-hmm. I've always mentally tried to think, how can I work with a company and build a bridge to other companies to build, an ecosystem, a cannabis ecosystem that thrives on good agriculture, good produce, and producing sustainable, high-quality products of all different formats. So, yeah, I think I've successfully, somewhat, there's always challenges, built this nice little ecosystem with the groups that I'm fortunate to work with and the mentors that I have from all these different companies that help me achieve these goals. And Puro came about because, we started in New Zealand. I was consulting over there to a number of groups, and there's a phenomenal legacy industry in New Zealand. What they call cottage cannabis, which is cute, is thriving. So there's growers that are growing beautiful cultivars. They're progressive with their cultivation and processing and curing. And I think the legacy industry that exists there is powerful. So we went over there, and I was looking at what latitudes, what environments to grow high quality outdoor cannabis. And what I figured out over my Churchill fellowship was it's not just around the environment. There's a few things that you have to consider. So look at Humboldt County or Sonoma in California. They're around the sort of 40 to 42 degrees north. And where we are in New Zealand, we're 42 degrees south. So we've got that same like long summers, hot, intense light intensity. New Zealand's got a hole in the ozone layer, so you get crazy UV light intensity, which is why Sauvignon Blanc grapes that grow there have such a unique flavour profile. And we've seen indoor cultivators use UV lights to change the cannabinoid and the aromatic profile. So we looked at it and went, okay, around 42 degrees south is where I want to be. And Tassie's another great cannabis growing region for the same sort of reasons. And then it's also everything else that exists there. You can't be 42 degrees south and not have people. Like labour is incredibly important, so skilled labour, like viticulture workers are great cannabis growers.
Right.
Winemakers and laboratory assistants are really good in packaging, processing, quality and compliance. I need dams dug, I need boilermakers, I need sparkies, I need all those ancillary industries, I need transport, I need storage. All of those factors that make strong wine regions also complement cannabis because a lot of them are the same skills. Yeah. So Sonoma, incredible wine region, beautiful cannabis region.
Yeah.
New Zealand, Marlborough, incredible wine region, and now we're transforming it into a cannabis region. Tassie is the same as well. So it's a bit of a cheat code, but I've kind of found if you have good, cool climate wine varieties, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, then you'll probably grow really good cannabis, and you'll have all the people and industries that allow growth of that industry. So they're there to support you.
That's a really interesting insight. That's a great connection. We'll kind of circle back to the Churchill Fellowship, but that's a nice little cheat code you got there.
Yeah, it was one figured out through a bit of trial and error. I was consulting to groups across Australia and New Zealand. Yeah. You had people setting up facilities in far north Queensland in polytunnels, and then right down to the bottom of Tassie, right out to Western Australia, trying to troubleshoot what dehumidification do they need, what supplementary lighting, what environmental control, what's going to work there and be most risk averse, because cannabis is genetically plastic, it'll grow anywhere. Yeah. But to grow it to the standard, hit the quality targets that you want, there's a few little things that are better done by nature than by man-made influence. Yeah. So we looked at this location in Marlborough, and we figured out we wanted to do our outdoor cultivation, do that organically, and at the same time have small research and breeding facility, genetic development, small batch pharmaceutical validation, so showing that we can replicate indoors with a super high quality product. And we're really fortunate to get a government grant that allowed us to make some mistakes along the way. They co-funded us in technologies for drying and processing, and they co-funded us to write this handbook and do a lot of genetic development, find the varieties that suited our region, like the first people to bring Sauvignon Blanc to Marlborough, or the first ones to plant Chardonnay in the Yarra Valley. When you find that variety that suits that environment, you're ready to rock and roll. And we've been trialling more than 80, I think we're close to 100 now, different cultivars at Puro. And we've started finding the champions of the stable. And from the outset, we've had these really beautiful results where we're getting unique terpenes at higher levels than I've seen elsewhere. We've never, touch wood, had powdery mildew. And powdery mildew is in every cannabis facility I've ever visited. And it's horrible, and it's a pain in the ass to deal with. We've never had that because we're about 150 metres up off the ocean. We have strong ocean breezes with what I believe the iodine in the air is antifungal, and that prevents powdery. So, yeah, to date, in coming on 6 years of cultivation at that site, not a speck of powdery has ever been recorded, and we grow relatively clean product for what is an outdoor, it's an outdoor grow, and that's never going to be as sterile as an indoor cultivation. So, yeah, we're really proud of where we're up to. We've got products sold locally in New Zealand. We've, to my knowledge, got the best-selling products in New Zealand come from our material. It's still quite a small infant market there. It's just starting. And we've been really successful with recent exports out of New Zealand, primarily into Australia. We've got a few really good partners here, and we grow bespoke products for those partners. We want to help them if it's a boutique certain type of flower with a certain cannabinoid or terpene profile, if it's a certain hash, sift, or further processed material to get to a distillate, whatever, we'll cater to that and grow to help them to grow. We've never launched a Puro branded product to market. We always sell B2B, and these other groups bring the products out. And yeah, we don't sell to everyone. We sell to the people we want to work with and grow with our partners. So it's tricky, like the cannabis world in general, navigating the regulatory quagmire that exists. But we're pretty proud of where we're up to now. I think we are the largest exporter of cannabis out of New Zealand, and we're growing and building new partnerships and building new value chains every year. So we're very close to getting the first product from New Zealand into European and UK distribution, or the first Puro product. I think there is one other group that's got some material to Europe, I believe. But yeah, we're making new partnerships around the world and really walking the walk with our values. We grow sustainably. We grow in a way that I think shows that you can do it ethically, economically, and produce an ultra high quality product. So I'm pretty excited about what the future holds for Puro. It's been a long journey, and I'm really excited by it.
There's real integrity there, and I think those best in the know that cannabis is a long game, and there's a bunch of companies out there that can just grow to what, they believe the market wants, grow at bulk, push it out, go, yeah, this is what consumers want, so go sell it. You guys are really reversing that and going, what great things exist? What do these people want? What does this section of the community want? One of the things I've noticed is I'm really struggling to get low THC flowers these days. And that's something, even with my high tolerance, sits and works really well for me. And it's because the market is dictating high THC. So it's really nice to hear that you guys are taking this approach of going, let's not just kowtow to, what the consumer demands are, and actually put some sustainable, ethical, quality cannabis out there that might turn some heads, might change some minds. So I'm really impressed to hear that. In your spiel, I heard some good reasons why you're growing in New Zealand. Obviously, the government, supporting you guys a little bit, which is something I'd love to see here. Also, the incredible geography there, helping the way you grow your plants. Can I be so bold to ask, why New Zealand and not Australia?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't want to incur the wrath of the regulatory humans here. But in honesty, I've done projects in Australia we set up a project at RMIT University. It's a World Health Organization partner site. We had funding, we designed, supplied, I even got my white card and installed grow rooms at the university. And this is an established home of plant medicines and alternative medicines. The ODC was slow to move, the licensing process was tedious, and it was really frustrating. I was looking to do my PhD there, and there was a potential lead time of years to be licensed and permitted. And then I go over to New Zealand and I start working with groups over there. You've got a direct line to MPI and MedSafe, the regulatory bodies responsible. You can pick up the phone and someone will answer your questions. If you need a license changed, you can generally get things done quite quickly. And it hurts a lot of cultivators when I say this, but we got our license in 12 weeks.
Yeah.
But that was the main reason is the government there was eager to move faster. They saw the cannabis industry as jobs and growth and another agricultural commodity. Downstream for consumption and distribution, they're a little bit more heavy-handed. So products need to be registered, triplicate stability data. It's harder to get products onto market in New Zealand.
Right.
Which is why we sell more flour in Australia than we do in New Zealand.
Interesting.
Which is painful for me to say, because I want to be able to supply New Zealand grown to New Zealand people. But yeah, I guess from the agricultural side of things, they wanted us to bring a new economic stimulus to the region. They didn't see that dangerous plant mentality that exists. We're able to set up, like, we have cameras and pretty good fences, but it's a pragmatic amount of security. We didn't have to build a fortress. And you see some of the facilities in Australia.
I mean, I literally went to one that was an ex-detention centre. So
exactly. Yeah. What, next door to the poppy fields? Behind the barbed wire fence.
It is interesting. You know, it's kind of cool to hear the flip side, because it's similar where, you know, there are Australian companies growing here and then it's easier to export it than to sell it here. So it's interesting to hear these challenges. Have you been at the whim of the change of government in New Zealand at all? Because we've recently changed from a progressive government to a conservative government in New Zealand. Does that affect your ability to do business, or are things moving along nicely?
Actually still going in the right direction. I think because MPI and the Ministry of Health have really they've got a foundational understanding of what's needed and what wasn't working. So when the regulations first came out, there was things like we had to meet our minimum quality standards in New Zealand and the importers' quality standards, and that was a double up. And then if we wanted to sell, say, a kilo or 1,000 kilos, we had to pay for what was called a product assessment, which is like $6,000. Right. And there was all these little paper hoops that didn't make sense. So the New Zealand Medical Cannabis Council, one of our founders, Tim, has been sort of heading up that group for a little while with a phenomenal team around him. They have been lobbying to make the regulations more practical. And only about 2 months, maybe 3 months ago now, they said, yeah, you're right, let's change this.
Wow.
So, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That
so
sounds very reasonable of the government.
Totally reasonable. And like, let's not get into politics and governments, because that's a whole loaded question. But in terms of their approach to cannabis, they really saw what needed to change, and there's still changes needed, absolutely. Like, I still find it hard to get flour to market in New Zealand. Yeah. But the fact that they're allowing us to export starting material, like we can do dry sift or bubble hash or cryo-sifted material, we can do crude and sell that as a starting material. We don't have these product assessments or the double up on minimum quality standards. All of these little changes make it easier for us to thrive as an industry. And there's more groups across New Zealand. I think there's around 30 licensed growers, and that seems to be growing more rapidly than Australia. And they're getting on board with this. They're seeing that there's an industry developing. So I think outside of what's happening in the beehive in Wellington, there's actually a really good push for a cannabis industry that'll work and bring jobs to a region and hopefully bring a high quality medicine to people that are screaming out for it.
For better or worse, we lack an existing cannabis culture in Australia that I've seen in other places. You know, obviously Canada, even New Zealand. Do you think that these places that have a little bit more of progressive cannabis culture around, you know, casual use, it's a little bit easier for them to make progress? Because I would say, you know, Canada had a logical cannabis culture, but then kind of threw it away with legalisation. Even though New Zealand got very close to legalising on a referendum a few years ago that was 50.5% to 49.5%, you know, I think that referendum would pass today as we've, you know, gotten a few more years on. They seem to have this richer culture and therefore a greater acceptance. Do you think that plays into the government at all and some of the decision making, or is it just luck?
I don't think it's luck. I think there is this intergenerational like dogma around the dangerous plant mentality. Like, people in the generations above us have always been taught drugs are bad, cannabis is drugs. And now there's a real U-turn in that mindset that's needed. So majority of our politicians and population, for better or worse, still need an education or a mindset shift in how they look at cannabis. And yeah, Australia's been particularly underground. Like, our cannabis black market has thrived for decades.
Yeah. It's never hard to get cannabis from the black market.
And look at what happened in Adelaide back in the 90s and early 2000s. You could have 10 plants at home.
Yes, yeah.
And not going to go into the exact details of it, but what we saw from a macroeconomic sense, more white goods sold per capita than anywhere else, secondhand car sales, new car sales, hospitality. Adelaide economy was thriving.
Wow.
Everyone had 10 plants in the back room.
They're a little happier, a little more well.
They were gardening. That's therapeutic. They had some pocket money to spend.
Yeah.
And no one died. So that whole thing was a really interesting example of what happens with a semi-legal small plant quota and how that can benefit an entire economy. And I think obviously that played into the other states' demand, like being at Canberra University. If anyone had anything from Adelaide, that was fucking the cooter.
Yeah. I remember friends in bands used to like go over to Adelaide and they'd come back and they're just like, oh my God, man, I can't believe how much I got for how little. So like, I can't even remember the quality, but even just the cost effectiveness was amazing. Yeah. It was worth bringing back to Melbourne.
Exactly. And then that all got shut down and they made carbon filters a prohibited, a scheduled item. And Adelaide went back into the dark ages and the Australian cannabis community went back underground, as far underground as it exists, and only Nimbin is kind of the last
stronghold.
little,
That's one step forward, two steps back, isn't it? I mean, it was decriminalised in WA till I think 2002 or 4, and then they criminalised it again. It's like, oh man, we were so close. Like the logical steps are there. Nimbin's been cracking for 50 years. Adelaide did this in the 90s. WA was, it's fine. You didn't need to criminalise it again.
Canberra's got the 2 plant,
exactly,
150 grams.
Sky
Throw a brick on it, keep it tiny.
That's it. Let's hope for a little bit more progress because it's kind of frustrating to deal with, and it can be easy to get bogged down in the frustrations of this space.
Exactly. Like the system, we all could acknowledge the system is broken right now. There's APRA is chasing after overprescribers, black market and legal white market and the grey market are all a bit confused as to what their role and their future will look like. Yeah. And no individual country has it right at this stage. No set of regulations takes into account cultivation, consumption, harm minimisation, safety, efficacy, all of those factors all at once. But I think we're all, as a planet, progressing in the right direction, and these little changes here and there kind of steer us what to do and what not to do. Exactly. So I'm hopeful that we'll see a better change. And I think in Australia, we'll see a system that works, but I think we can all acknowledge right now there's some work to go. There's a little ways to go.
We touched briefly on Indicated Technology and Stealth Garden by name. Could you tell us a little bit about those organisations?
Yeah, so Stealth has been my family for a decade now, moving out of sort of retail hydroponics and home gardening stores. I wanted to work with someone that I believed had the best products. These guys in South Australia, it's an agricultural supply company that imports and distributes fertilizer, hardware, consumables, everything from pruning, trimming equipment from Japan, fertilizers from the US and around the world, hardware from Europe, dehumidifiers. And so Stealth has been a real pioneer in bring over high quality equipment that's not, not cheap and nasty, for lack of a better word. Yeah. The business model there is Stealth sells agricultural equipment to garden centres, nurseries, hydroponic stores. It's a B2B business, so we import and distribute bulk volumes of all these different agricultural commodities. And we've been set up in Australia. The guys started in 2007. They've set up in New Zealand, so we sell to hundreds of customers across Australia and New Zealand. And in the last 2 years, we've set up the Stealth Garden Thailand office, which sells a lot of the same products, but into cannabis farms, hydroponic stores, garden centres, and really targets the cultivation industry over there. So it's a great group of guys. We're really proud of the products that we stand behind, what I believe to be the world's best fertilizers. You've got House and Garden Nutrients winning cups for quality of product around the world. It's the fertilizer that I use in my facilities, and that's kind of been the ethos. We walk the walk with the products that we want to stand behind, and they're fun guys. We enjoy each other's company, and we're working on a few little projects. I gave you a sneak preview of one earlier, and it's a funny coinky-dink, right? So for backstory of that, my dad, in close to his retirement years, used to run rural business magazines. So he had a tree cropper magazine, he had rural agribusiness magazine, and he had one that was pest manager. So he was selling ads to Bayer and Syngenta and Monsanto on like big ag. And that was the last job he did before he retired. And then we had this idea at Stealth is we want to get education on good agriculture, on community, art and culture, because we've got these incredible artists that we work with, and I think there's like-minded people from the cannabis sector seem to have a lot of friends in the musical industries and in the arts. There's definitely for one reason or another, crossover between cannabis and the arts. And we wanted to publish that in a magazine. So in the last little while, we've been working on a project that should be coming out very, very soon in print and digital, and it's called Grow Zone Magazine, and it's about cultivation, art and culture. And we focus on new agricultural technologies. We focus on artists from around the world, and we focus on culture from events in Nimbin to events in Thailand. We talk about different albums, what vinyls that I've got on repeat at the moment, what movies are we watching on Saturday nights. Yeah. So it's really designed for our community, and it's got a lot of education in there as well. So those kinds of fun projects, it means that Stealth is more than just an ag supplies company where I guess we live the lifestyle, and the agricultural suppliers kind of allow us to work with our community to do that.
It's a really impressive mag. Thank you for giving me a little sneak peek. I'm really excited to see it released, and I'll be rushing out to get a copy of my own. It's a great connection of culture and practicality. This is an industry that does need to be legitimate, that is an agricultural industry that does need to have high standards, but there is also this culture we don't want to let go. And I think often I see people in one camp or the other. Nah, we're culture, fuck the pharmaceuticals. Nah, we're wearing suits, we don't want to talk to those guys. But this is a nice little meeting in the middle of the Venn diagram where it brings culture and practicality together. So it's a fantastic looking magazine. There's some great info about Puro in there. It's going to be really cool when that comes out.
I appreciate it. I was pretty happy to give you the first look. I don't think anyone outside of the industry or outside of the company has seen any preview yet.
Right on. Well, I've got 2 weeks to get my own Growth Zone magazine out in competition. I don't think I'll get there.
If you find any spelling mistakes in this one now, I'm just going to be defeated. A lot of work has gone into it.
You can tell, You can see it's a really great product, so I can't wait for people to see that.
I appreciate it. It is exciting, and I think you're right. It doesn't need to be the divide between the pharmaceutical, medicinal sector and grassroots home cultivation of any fruit, flower, tomatoes or cannabis. There's going to be an overlap there, and something I've always taken pride in is having that chameleon ability, being able to go to a pharmaceutical conference, interact with some executive from a big pharma company, and then go talk to my black market cropper mates that are doing their thing, and have the same level of love and admiration and respect for both of them, because they're just doing what they want to do. And I'm not one to say one or the other is better. They just need to learn to get along.
Well, and that's never going to be a fact that one is better than the other. So we do need to just get along, right?
Exactly. I think, and look at breeding. This is one that I've been pondering a little bit lately, is like your grassroots breeding is always going to have a place. Like the people that throw a bit of pollen in and get something out from their visual appearance and from their nose. They're not quantifying it as home grassroots breeding. And you find some crazy wild things in that, because it's got this incredible potential where it moves quickly, and you've got all these genetics from all over the world. And then you have scientific data-driven breeding, which has targets and traits and markers that you're really looking for. And that has its place as well. And I don't think I'd want to see a world without either one of those things operating.
I agree.
I like the things that people can come out with outside of what we call them, because we know that's a clusterfuck. It's cool to see that both can exist. And it's kind of, if I draw it back to the wine equivalent or alcohol in general, we can have homebrew, we can have the small plot, the Italian families that make their wine, or the Croatian families that make their wine, and it's not a labelled thing that, fuck, it tastes good. Yeah. And then you have the big ag side of viticulture doing their thing at the same time, having both, and they generally play nice together. And I think cannabis will learn to appreciate the differences and nuances with both of those two I guess, approaches to our plant.
Well, we're going to take a little break from our cannabis conversation for a moment to play a quiz.
Okay.
And we are going to play a quiz about rugby union. Now, I love the quiz in this show because it gives me and the listener, and sometimes the guest, an opportunity to actually learn something about a completely different topic. I've had a lot of fun in the past with other guests and, their areas of interest in pop culture. And I know that you love rugby union. As a proper bubble Victorian that grew up with AFL and cricket, can you please tell me the difference between rugby union and rugby league, first of all?
Oh, well, rugby union is better. Fuck, that's such a loaded question because every rugby league fan is going to be like, this fucking dickhead.
I've heard an expression once that rugby union is a game for bastards played by gentlemen and rugby league is a game for gentlemen played by bastards. Does that sit well with you?
It does. I think there's nuances to both. I think for me, what I love about the difference with rugby union is you have 15 blokes on the field. Some of them are short and squat. Some of them you need tall and gangly. Some of them need to be fast runners. Others need to be really strong. So they have all these different body types and they have all these different roles. And then you have this overarching strategy of using your forwards, the big burly blokes, to move around the field that allow the backs to do their fast and flashy things. So it's a little bit more like a chess game.
Yeah, sounds it.
Like in rugby league, there's strategy, of course there is, and there's techniques involved. But I think rugby union, that's why I like it, is those intricacies of the different set piece movements and how you need to take advantage of different people on the field. And I loved that as a small skinny kid in high school. I loved that there was a sport where the halfback in rugby union kind of hides behind the big forwards.
Right, yeah.
So I was like, cool, this is my position. I'm the link between these giants and these fast guys out the back, and they can kind of orchestrate the team around the field. So number 9 is sort of my favourite position on the rugby field.
Right.
And I guess that's the main difference, is those set pieces and the difference between rugby union and league. But there is crossover. Like good rugby league players often transition back and forth, and union players go to league. So it's kind of probably the most two related. And then you've got Aussie rules and soccer and the other big ones. But no, I'm a union boy.
Right on. Well, let's learn a little bit about union. So we've got 6 multiple choice questions here. Let's see how you go. Rugby union was said to be invented in 1823 when a rebellious schoolboy stole the ball during a football or soccer match and ran it into the goal.
William Webb Ellis?
His name was William Webb Ellis. Correct. What is his name attached to today? Is it a grandstand in Twickenham, a highway in every country in the UK, or the Rugby World Cup trophy?
Rugby World Cup trophy.
That is correct. 1 from 1. Off to a flying start. Number 2. The same what has been used for the opening game of every Rugby World Cup since 1905. Is it the same ball, the same whistle, or the same patch of grass?
Same whistle?
That is correct. So there's the Gil Evans whistle. He was a Welsh referee who first blew that whistle in 1905, and they've been using it since. I hope they clean it. All right, number 3. The first rugby balls were made from what? A, hemp, B, natural rubber, or C, pig's bladders?
Pig's bladders.
That is correct. 3 from 3. True or false? The first time a national anthem was sung before a sporting event happened before a rugby game. Or match, rather.
I fucking have no idea. I'm going to say true.
It is true. So in 1905, the Welsh team spontaneously broke out in their national anthem in response to the haka. So the anthem has been a sporting tradition ever since. So we've got rugby to thank for that one.
Yeah.
Maybe thank for them. I'm sick of every NBA game between 2 American teams having the national anthem before it. That definitely goes on mute beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how many people embrace it as much with the nationalistic pride, but nice sentiment. Yeah. We're proud.
Yeah. Well, you're killing it. You got 5 from 5, and this is the lucky last one. A try is a way of scoring points in rugby union, and today gives the scoring team 5 points for a successful try. How much was a try originally worth?
Was it 4?
No.
Was it less?
0, 3, or 4. I've already told you that 4 is no.
3.
No, so it's actually 0.
Denied.
The word try used to mean a try at goal. So when they got the ball over the line, they would then take it back and kick it through the post. So yeah, there was a time where a try didn't give you points like it does the 5 points today.
fucking cool.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to have learned
So
that.
we learnt something. So
Yeah.
you got 5 from 6, you killed the quiz, and you learnt something. So your dignity is intact, and we've got some education out of it.
And we may need to pay homage to the fact that New Zealand is the best rugby country in the entire world. And that's part of the reason. You asked why I work in New Zealand for the cannabis projects. It's because their rugby team is really good.
Yeah.
And it's super depressing being an Australian rugby union fan.
Rugby union post 1998 Johnny Els doesn't exist to me.
Yeah, but we're getting it back. We're coming back. The team's good. The coach is good.
Yeah.
But it does make for some interesting banter every single Monday throughout winter when my Kiwi teammates are happy to give me a bit of nickel.
Well, when the cricket spins back around, usually we get one up on them most of the time. So
exactly, they've got to have something.
Got to give those little champs something.
Yeah, they can have rugby. We'll have everything else.
Well, Tom, as we head towards the end of the show, I want to wrap up talking about your Churchill Fellowship. And this is going back in time now to 2019. You were awarded a Churchill Fellowship, which is a grant initiative that allows individuals to travel the world to learn about something they're passionate about. 100 flights, 10 countries, 50 site visits, 5 years in the rear view. What are your reflections on that experience?
So, yeah, the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust Fellowship was the most life-changing experience that I've ever had. Really, it is an incredible opportunity for anyone from any background to travel abroad and learn about their passion and bring that knowledge back and share that knowledge to the wider community. That's the benefit. They want that published knowledge to be open source. It's used by anyone. My Churchill Trust report is available for download. The video is there forevermore.
Great video. I'll put that in the show notes.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun making that one.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I guess I was fortunate to travel and I wanted to look at cannabis agriculture. And then I got to each of these countries and all of these different facilities around the world and realized the cannabis agriculture is a direct reflection of the regulations that steer it, for better or worse. And there's a lot of different ways to approach cannabis cultivation, depending on the commodity, the customer, the location that you're operating within. And I think we can learn a lot from the mistakes that people were making at that time. So I traveled in 2019 and that was the glory days of Canadian industry. People were spending unfathomable amounts of money. Capital raising was going through the roof and the green rush was at its peak. Yeah. It was incredible to see, but it was also, it was a false economy. Like no one was really making the money they were talking about. There was lots of fine dining dinners that I got invited out to and beautiful hotels and really flashy businesses with boardrooms. And I was looking at it going, why are we not just going out to farms and facilities and seeing just like cultivation and processing? Why are they taking me to this wanky restaurant? I'm like, I don't really appreciate this. I want to see the grow and the finished product. I'm not wowed by this. And a lot of these people were scaling beyond belief, like 1 million square foot glass houses. Like Canopy at the time took over an entire town, like Smith Falls, the old Hershey town. Everyone was working for Canopy. I'd get to my motel, the lady there, she's a joint roller for Canopy. Yeah. I get into the cafe and the next person there works for Canopy. They employed everyone. They built this educational museum, which was incredible, and then this whole tour of a facility in this beautiful glass house, but it wasn't real. You could see that it was there to raise capital and not to produce high quality product.
This is that Tweed facility in Smiths Falls?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Lots of like Snoop Dogg and all these celebrity things around it. Yeah. But then when I came to seeing like the mother room and the clone room and the nursery, there was things that didn't quite make sense from an agronomic perspective. And that was just one of them. I don't mean to name and shame, but Canopy is probably the obvious candidate, having spent how many $1 billion of investor money.
Yeah, so much.
Which didn't help any of us in the cannabis world. But a lot of these Canadian groups and groups throughout Europe, and when I went to Israel, they had their own challenges. They were making similar mistakes where they were growing speculatively without thinking about who their customer actually was, what the existing culture was asking for, what the quality needed to be, what the varieties and their product range needed to be. So I think some of the big lessons there were not to grow too big too fast, not to treat it as if it's not an agricultural commodity. I'm not going to name names here, but if your directors are paying themselves some stupid wages and not putting the money back into the company to grow as a startup in a nascent industry, then I'd probably be reluctant to put my money in as a shareholder.
Yeah.
It's about building an industry from the ground up. We're not reinventing a new thing. Like Jodie Emery was a badass. I sat down with her and she was like, she brought me to tears because her whole ethos was like, look, we're not inventing an internet. This isn't a new thing. We've got an industry that exists. We need to learn to work with it and work at the scale that exists with the industry that exists. We don't need to grow $10 billion worth of cannabis and hope that we'll be able to sell it, stockpile it, and bottom out the price of the market. So, yeah, I think that like Canadian false economy really scared me a little bit. And a lot of those companies wanted to be seed to sale, farm to pharmacy. They went with the vertical is the only way. And that was something that I looked at and went, man, this is hard.
Yeah.
You want to be a nursery, which is its own entity, a cultivator, that's its own industry. You want to be a processor, a packaging facility, an extraction facility, a cookie factory, a dispensary, and you want to have whatever. All
in-house sales representatives and everything.
Everything, for all of those different areas of the value chain. And then I looked at what some groups were doing well, which is we want to be a cultivator. Yeah. We want to be an extractor. We want to make the world's best gummies. We want to be a transport company. Those people that stick to their knitting and found their niche and thrived in it were doing pretty well. So that was one of the things with Puro was we said, let's find our niche and let's do that. Let's be cultivators that dabble in research and breeding, but focus on primary produce. We get to bulk pack material, we're done. Then someone else takes it, treats it, packages it, markets it, brands it, distributes it, and sells it. Our niche is cultivation. And you see other groups that are focusing on packaging and processing, absolutely crushing it. Some groups that are focusing on storage and distribution, awesome, great business model. So knowing your niche, sticking to your knitting and really thriving in that area of the value chain, super important. And I think the last thing that was really profound for me with the Churchill Fellowship was the relationships. Like I have some of my best friends to date. Some of the people I work with right now are people that I met for a day or two on the Churchill Fellowship. Like I'd fly into Ontario. I went to the Med Relief facility and sat down with a beautiful dude named Juan, best grower in the entire world. He hates it when I call him that, but he is the best grower I've ever met. And he's a fucking legend of a human. So Juan now runs a company called Sustanza with two other friends that I've met through the fellowship. And Sustanza are the world's best cannabis consultants. And we're working with them in Thailand. We're really proud to be working with Juan. And it all came from being shown around his facility, spending the day with him at Med Relief, and then we went out for a steak dinner. And I was on Churchill Fellowship money, and I remember I was like, man, get what you want, buy whatever you want. He ordered the biggest steak that came out with some stupidly big knife, and it was like the most outrageously expensive thing. And I was like, man, I'm going to get you for this. So now I'm happy that we're making some money with him.
That was just a small little investment.
Yeah, at the time I was like, this dude, fuck. But it was a lovely dinner, and it's a lifelong relationship. Yeah. And he's just one of some of my best friends through the cannabis world that came from that fellowship. So you learn a lot, but you build relationships that professional and personally so powerful, and that's what I'm really, really grateful for. And I would encourage everyone to put their name forward for it. Tim Crow in Tasmania has been the next Churchill Fellow, looking more at the hemp industry.
Right.
But he's a big part of the cannabis and hemp industry. So there's now a small little Churchill cannabis community that's starting to exist, or whatever it happens to be, whether it's viticulture, cannabis, tomato farming, or something completely different. One lady was doing her fellowship on using dogs in courtrooms to make people feel more comfortable in a courtroom as a therapy dog. And we still talk about dog training.
Well, in recommending people the Churchill Fellowship, what's the application process like? Like you're getting a really rich experience, so I imagine it's somewhat challenging. It's wouldn't say an overwhelming experience, but I'm sure it matches the level of money you're being given and resources you're being given. So is it a difficult process to go through?
Yeah. It's not easy.
And I guess so it should be.
Exactly. Like, so you put in a written application, you have to get references, and you say what you want to research and why. pick any topic that you're passionate about and say why you need to find this knowledge elsewhere. Why doesn't it exist in Australia? And then give a rough idea of where you want to go and when. And you can change that at any time. They give you the money weeks before you leave. So you could literally just spend it on a car and not take advantage of the whole thing. But you wouldn't, because it'd be silly. So you get the written application in. Then you go through a multiple stage interview process where they bring you into pretty intimidating environments. I remember mine, one of them was in the top floor of the Royal Children's Hospital. Big, long boardroom. It felt like it was 40 metres long.
Yeah.
A whole lot of people in suits, very conservative-looking people. And they grill you. They ask what the money's for, who you're going to see, why is it important to people, why is it important to the economy, the community. They try to find holes in it. And obviously that's their goal. And then you get invited back for a second and final interview stage process. And then you go away and eventually hopefully get a phone call saying you've received it. I do remember the second and final stage of my interview process. I was so nervous, like palms sweaty, waiting outside to be called in, and you see people coming out from their interview like shaking because they've just been ripped apart. And I walked into the room and it felt like a 100-meter long wooden table. It was almost like fear and loathing. Like this is trippy. And then there was a lady with blue hair and another lady with pink hair. And my first comment, and I had big dreads at this time.
I found my people.
Sleeve tattoos. And I just said, look, I'm so grateful for you two for having the most spectacular hair in the room. And that takes the attention off me. Thank you so much. And that just broke the ice. And from there,
love that.
Because, I'm a white guy with dreadlocks talking about cannabis. I know that's a cliche. And, yeah, it was a really fun process once I kind of got through that first nervous energy that existed. And then, they give you training. You get a golden ticket, a letter from the Churchill Trust after you meet with the Premier, and that says you need to let Tom into your facility for the good of humankind.
Yeah.
It's very important. And that letter meant that I could go to Canopy, Aurora, Tilray, Tweed, all these different facilities. And a lot of people, like there was cultivation facilities a kilometre up the road from each other, but everyone had the secret sauce mentality, which I hate. So no one knew what anyone else was doing. And I was one of the first people that was fortunate enough with a video camera, because I was the first Churchill fellow to make a documentary on it. I was the first one that was fortunate enough to travel between all these cannabis facilities.
Right.
And so this is for the good of the Australian people. You need to let me in. And no one saw that as a commercial threat. They just went, oh, cool, happy. And so, it was interesting talking to these different Canadian growers and processors, and then being able to like create links between them and them finding friends and connection. And then we'd all go out for a drink afterwards and introducing these people that were technically very serious competition with that secret sauce IP bullshit, but actually very like-minded people trying to work towards a similar goal. And I think that's one thing I'm going on a bit of a ramble here, but one thing that I found quite profound was cannabis doesn't yet have that level of community. I know there's some groups starting to set up cultivation associations, but secret sauce mentality doesn't work. Like we're farmers, and if you go to viticulture or tomatoes or any other agricultural commodity, they have open days, they have field farm visits. When I was in the tomato facility here in Cranbourne, we would have all of the tomato farmers come in and all the suppliers, and we would talk about what pest and disease pressure were prevalent that year, what products to combat them. What the new genetics were. The Comeat tomato was 3 shades more red and grew a little bit more vigorously. We had all of that information. Wine Yarra Valley puts on open days and field days, and as I was saying, we put on a drone event day on the farm here, and we got all the viticulturalists in, and they come down and talk about what's going on. Are you battling downy? Are you having issues this year? Cannabis, we don't have that sense of community yet, and I really want to see more cultivators just have a yarn, because we'll all do better if we all work as a team instead of having the secret sauce or talking shit about each other's product.
We talk a lot about the cannabis community. It's still, I think, very contrived, and it's still got a long way to go at a patient level, at a consumer level. But the industry is only going to thrive through sharing, through working together, because ultimately it makes us better.
Exactly. It's the rising tide mentality. Rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's important. And I think we're getting there. We're starting to see more support for local cultivators. We're starting to see cultivation groups. But again, the more we bring it together, the more we work together and support local. That's been my big ethos for the last little while. Grow local, consume local, support local. It's not nationalistic. It's just we want a good Australian and New Zealand farmer base and a good Australian and New Zealand consumer base that appreciate one another. So as much as we can grow local, consume local, it's good for everyone and brings the industry together.
Well, Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here with me today, or for us to both be out here at Habitat 1 in Healesville. Shout out to those guys again. The last segment of the show is called Pauls of Wisdom, and though we value the long-form conversation, we look to leave the listener with a key takeaway, dinner party fact, or call to action. So, Tom, what is your Paul of Wisdom?
Yeah, there's a lot that we've been through on this talk, but I think for me, it comes down to that resounding ethos of, as a cannabis and an agricultural community, we need to support local. Grow it locally, consume local material, support your local industry that exists on whatever side of the fence you may find yourself on, but make sure you're focusing on supporting our local industry, and together we'll grow and consume and have a good time as a community.
That's lovely. I thought about how I did the exact opposite of that recently. I had a Canadian grown flower that I had shipped from a pharmacy in Lismore down to Melbourne. And then I took a trip to Byron Bay where I took that cannabis back up with me and then back home to Melbourne. So that is the absolute antithesis of buying and smoking and consuming and shopping locally. So yeah, let's fight that.
Yeah, you've gone on that. I call that concept flower miles, right? You've got your food miles. Where's your food coming from?
Disgraceful.
Definitely do. Think about your flower miles. Where's this come from and how far and how old? And let's try to reduce those flower miles because ethically it's the right thing, environmentally, and then it helps a community to grow together and then we all grow together.
Exactly. A little chance for some quick promo. What are some things people should be looking out for?
Yeah, I guess if you're looking for some new products hitting the medicinal market, there's some really exciting things coming out of New Zealand. I won't name names, but keep an eye out for some beautiful flower, some really progressive products in the flower market, some new commodities in the oil and vaporizer market. Just keep an eye out for products coming from New Zealand, particularly if it's certified organic. There's some exciting stuff from Puro and the other New Zealand cultivators. If you are looking to cultivate fruit, flowers, tomatoes, or in Thailand growing some cannabis, have a look at Stealth Garden Wholesale. Have a look at the brands we represent. House and Garden Nutrients is the recipe for high quality, cup winning, very aromatic product with a full profile that you're looking for. And if all of that is challenging and you feel like you need a glass of wine to wind down or you're buying Christmas presents for your family that aren't cannabis consumers, jump on Tilly J Wine's website, grab a bottle. We've just launched a rosé. We've got a Grenache, a Pinot, an Aligote and a Chardonnay coming out. And I really appreciate you supporting our independent wine brand. There's a lot we can learn from cannabis and viticulture working together. Takes a lot of good beer to make wine, takes a little bit of wine to grow cannabis, and takes a lot of cannabis to do both of those as well. So appreciate the support on all of those aspects. And reach out to me anytime. I'm always available and I always love chatting with the community.
I'm only a part-time boozer, but I believe I've had the 2023 Pinot Noir from Tilly J. Absolutely superb, and I am keen to check out that rosé. So while I, am very limited in my alcohol enthusiasm, those are some top-notch drops. So yeah, I'm happy to give the support and the shout out there. Another shout out again to our friends at Habitat 1 in Healesville who have hosted us graciously today. Tom, I'll put in the show notes your LinkedIn and your Instagram, which are well worth following. It's been a real delight to talk to you. We've been trying to make this happen since June last year, and it has happened when it was supposed to. So, man, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely to chat.